Good morning, CFA family. Jayla and Pastor Kim here. I'm sure I'm not the only one who's realized over the past few months it's been really hard to stay away from people we care about, like our friends and our family. Today we're going to talk about a man who just had to do just that because he had an illness called leprosy. And like the coronavirus, nobody wants to catch leprosy. And he had to stay away from his friends and his family for a really long time. But one day, Jesus helped him. And like Jesus helped him, Jesus can help us. And that brings us to our Bible point today. It's Jesus' power helps us when we're lonely. And I think we should explain that to the kids. Don't
Absolutely,
you think, Kim?
Jayla.
Okay, so Jesus' power.
We've done that lots.
Yeah. And we're going to make a flat palm thing. We're going to make a fist and stick our thumb up. And
Thumbs
this
up.
will be helps us when we're lonely. We're going to take our index finger, put it to our face, and just go up and down.
Excellent. Let's do it one more time. Ready?
Jesus' power helps us when we're lonely. But before we get started, let's grab some supplies. You'll need your thankfulness journal, markers and crayons, a water bottle of some sort, or a container filled with 1/3 of water and some vegetable oil. So pause the video while you gather your supplies. I also just want to take a minute to talk about this week's God sightings. How have you seen God at work this week? For me, it was my mom. I had a really rough last few days, and she was there for me through all of it. And so I think God was really speaking to me through her and showing that God's always going to be there with us, even through the bad times and the good. So pause the video while you share your God sightings with your family. Even with all the good things God's doing right now, there are still some hard things too. What's been the hardest thing for you throughout this whole coronavirus situation? Pause the video while you share with your families what's been the hardest for you. One of the hardest things for many people is not getting to see friends and extended family. For me, I miss my school friends because now that there's no school, I don't get to see them like I normally would. Pause the video and talk to your family. Share a name of someone you miss and you can't see because of coronavirus.
So being separated from the people that we love and care about can make us feel lonely. But as we're learning today,
Jesus' power helps us when we're lonely.
So let's hear about how Jesus' power helped a man in the Bible who was probably very lonely. As Jayla mentioned, back in Bible times, there was a disease called leprosy. And for people who got leprosy, they had some really painful sores all over their body, and there was no cure. And often it would lead to death, or they would lose fingers and toes. And people were afraid of catching it, much like they're afraid of catching coronavirus right now. So what are some of the things that we're supposed to do right now to try to make sure we don't catch this virus? So pause the video and list as many of those as you can. So one thing we're supposed to do is wash our hands really well. And we're also supposed to stay 6 feet away from one another, except people that we live with. And that's called social distancing. Well, we're being told to stay that far away so we don't catch this virus, but people in the Bible times knew all about social distancing when it came to leprosy. In fact, they were so afraid of catching leprosy that anyone who had the disease wasn't even allowed to come into the city. And if somebody with leprosy happened to be around other people, they would have to keep yelling out, "Unclean, unclean," and warn people so that they could stay away and nobody would accidentally touch somebody with leprosy. And all of these rules must have made the people who had leprosy feel pretty lonely. So let's try a little experiment. I want you and your families to all stand up, and find a space at least 6 feet away from one another. So everyone stand up and move 6 feet apart. Now, while keeping that distance, so no leaning in or going less than 6 feet away, but what I want you to do is to try to reach out and give somebody a hug. So make sure you're not leaning more than 6 feet. So unless you have really long arms, you wouldn't even be able to touch one another. There'd be no hugs, no pats on the back, just you in your own little bubble. So here's a question for you to think about. How do you think it would feel to have to be that far apart from everyone else for years? So pause the video and talk about that. It could be pretty lonely not to ever be able to get close enough to a person to give them a hug. But let's see what Jesus did when he met a man with leprosy. And if you want to follow along, the story's in Matthew chapter 8, verses 1 to 3. So while Jesus was walking along, a man with leprosy came up to him out of the crowd. The man knew Jesus had the power to heal his leprosy, so he said to Jesus, "Lord, if you are willing, you can heal me and make me clean." So Jesus reached out his hand and touched the man and answered, "I am willing, be healed." And the man was healed instantly. But just wait a second. Did you hear what Jesus did? So I'm going to say it again. Jesus touched the man. Now keep in mind, leprosy was something that people avoided and would never want to come in contact with anyone who had leprosy. And so this man probably hadn't had anyone touch him in years because everyone was avoiding him. He probably hadn't had a hug or a pat on the back or anything like that. And then Jesus walks up and touches him. Jesus wasn't afraid of getting leprosy. And Jesus knew that his power was greater than any disease, including leprosy and including the coronavirus. And Jesus knew also that this man not only needed his body healed, but that his heart needed healing too. And so Jesus wanted to not just heal his body, but to heal his heart and his loneliness and make sure that he felt loved. And so Jesus understood that he was feeling alone and that Jesus wanted to care for him by actually touching him and having that contact. And so that's why Jesus says in Matthew 28:20 to all of us, "I will be with you always, even to the end of the age." Everyone needs to know that Jesus is there with them and cares and is part of our lives. And so sometimes we can get lonely or we can feel like nobody understands us. But this promise from Matthew 28:20, where Jesus says, "I will be with you always, even to the end of the age," is a promise we can hold on to with hope. Jesus is with us, and with one touch, he can heal our loneliness. So we need to be wise and protect ourselves from the coronavirus and from all kinds of sicknesses, of course. But being separated from people not only can keep us safe physically, it can also cause us to feel sometimes pretty lonely. So pause and talk about these questions. Who do you know that might be feeling lonely right now? And how could you reach out to them? So pause and talk about that. Thanks for sharing. We can reach out to others and help them when they're feeling lonely. But even if we're all alone, we know that Jesus' power helps us when we're lonely. He's promised he'll always be with us, and he cares for us, and he heals our hearts.
One way Jesus' power helps us when we're lonely is to remind us that Jesus is our friend no matter what's going on. You always have a friend right there next to you, not 6 feet away, but right next to you. Let's sing a song about that. I have a friend in Jesus. You can pause the video and search up on Lifetree Kids.
Or YouTube.
Or YouTube. People in Jesus' time didn't want people with leprosy mixing around with the rest of them because they were afraid they were going to catch it. I have a fun little science experiment to help us think more about that. So now it's time you need your oil, your bottle of water, or your container of water, sorry. And so now you're going to put the oil in with the water first, and then the oil second. I have baby oil and colored water, but you can use any type of oil, and it can just be clear water if you want. Now, we're going to mix it all together like this, and then if you can, close the container tightly. If you can't grab something you can stir it with, because we're going to stir it and shake them. So now that you have it closed tightly, you might want to have an adult double check just in case. Now we're going to shake it for 10 seconds or stir it for 10 seconds. I'll count down for you. Ready? 10, 9, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. We mixed it up really well. While we're waiting to see what happens, talk with your families about this question. What do you miss most because you're being separated from others right now? Pause the video while you share with your families. As the mixture settled down, you can see that it doesn't look like the water and the oil mixed at all. It's natural for them because they're practicing social distancing. It's kind of their thing. But it's not so natural for us to be separated 6 feet apart from everyone that we love and care about. Being separated from others can make us feel lonely, but we can turn to Jesus for help because Jesus' power helps us when we're lonely. Even though we're separated from our friends right now, we still have our family right here with us. We can still connect with people online, and we can even do online kids connection together. If it's healthy for you, go ahead and gather in your family for a big group hug. And if it's not safe, you can give each other a social distancing hug like this.
And we're going to ask you to thank Jesus for every person in your family by name. So in just a second, pause the video and pray for each other, thanking Jesus for each person in your family. So focusing on people Jesus has put into our lives can help us feel less lonely. And that's one way that Jesus' power helps us when we're lonely. So when this video ends, we're going to get you to draw in your thankfulness journal. You have that with you. And this week we're asking you to draw someone you're thankful that you can connect with. So someone you've got to spend time with, whether it's a family or close friend or a relative, either in person or online, but you've been able to connect. And so draw that in your journal. And don't forget, you can also add your God sightings. So Jayla, did you draw one for this week?
I did.
Excellent.
So this week I drew me and Kim. I'm thankful I can connect with Kim.
That's
so I can
awesome.
connect with you guys. And I put the date at the top and the memory verse on the bottom. And I'm thankful I can connect with Kim because I love spending time with Kim and I love getting to connect with you guys, even if it's not face to face, but I can still connect with you guys over the camera.
Exactly, and it's been really fun working with Jayla through all of these lessons. We have a lot of laughs doing this. And so last thing I want to mention before we say goodbye for this week is we do have some resources available on our website that let you review our Bible point, but also our Bible verse and our Bible story about how Jesus healed the leper. And so if you go to cfachurch.ca, you're going to see we have a coloring sheet which shows our Bible story and has our Bible verse at the bottom. There's also a craft that is mentioned there as well. So the instructions for the craft are there. And when you make the craft, it actually helps you to be able to tell the Bible story to others. So you're going to make a little man who is leprosy. You're going to have to do some coloring. But basically, you have this little man who is full of spots. He has leprosy. And this is going to help you tell the story of how Jesus came and touched him. And in the process of touching him, made him whole. He was healed. Healed on his body and all the sores that he had, but also healed in his heart from the loneliness. So it's a great way to retell the Bible story to your friends and family. So we're excited to see you again next week. So goodbye for now.